Hello and welcome to the That's So Craven podcast, your one stop shop for all things Fulham. We are back after the international break, here to discuss the upcoming game against West Ham. Here joining me today, we have Dave sitting in a beautiful corner of a Weatherspoon somewhere in the UK. Is this like a Find Dave session for us where first person to come get gets a free piece of That's So Craven merch?
Well, I'm certainly not going to be showing off what table number I'm on because I know Skibby would be straight there with the mushy peas and the blackcurrant cordials. So that's certainly not going to be happening today. But yeah, it's good to be here. I'm glad I could get on the pod. That's the main thing because, I don't know if it's the same for you guys, but this international break has just been horrendous. I think I actually prefer the summer gap than the international break because at least the summer gap, there's transfer news and things to keep you occupied. You know, right now during this international gap, it's just been like Fulham don't exist and it's horrendous. I mean, all I've been thinking is what team Marco's going to play on Saturday. That's just constantly going through my head with no answer. So it'd be nice to finally get to Saturday and see what that is, so I can actually concentrate on something else.
Yeah, I can't personally say I love international breaks. It is always, especially once the season's started and you've just got back into it, and all of a sudden there's no football for a couple of weeks. It's rough, and even worse being an Australian fan at the moment who had a couple of terrible results over the last 2 weeks. So let's move on from the international break and introduce Dad as well. How are we going tonight?
Yep, very good. Thank you. Good to be here. Yeah, I mean, I'm having a bit of a nightmare work-wise and outside of here, so pretty good to sit and talk about Fulham. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, there's a fair bit to talk about. Well, before we get started, let's talk, as always, about our Discord, a really good place to get in amongst the That's So Craven and the Fulham community. Loads of content on there at the moment. Even though the transfer window is closed, there's still even some rumblings in the transfer Discord. There's always stuff coming through from Cottage Tactico. There's updates on the women's, the academy, everything you could ever want in one place. Please do join the Fulham Discord. You'll find our links in our Twitter and on all of our socials. And additionally, www.cravenpod.com. Regular articles being posted. Our midweek moments will be out after this podcast is released as well. So please do check it out for all your Fulham news. But let's get straight into it, guys. Let's just touch briefly on the result against Ipswich. Dave, I'll throw to you first. It's been a couple of weeks now since that game. How are we feeling now that the dust has sort of settled on what was at the time a little bit of a disappointing result?
It was a disappointing performance. I think we'll look back on it and it's a point, isn't it? And I suppose we should, away from home, always be respectful of the point and value the point. It's just a little bit frustrating that the second half performance was so sour and it kind of just left us then with a 2 week break to the next game, all wondering, how can we be better? How can we improve? So I think looking back at actually the 3 games, 4 points is probably par. Away at Old Trafford, home to Leicester, away at Ipswich, 4 points is probably par. So I guess it's okay in the great scheme of things. It's just we all hoped for more. And I think there was an opportunity against Ipswich to pick up a win. But in the end, given how the game went, I'll take the point.
Yeah, Dad, are we feeling fairly similar? I mean, as Dave said, we're sort of, if you want to get to 40 points across the season, you do need to be going at a point a game, and we are currently on track for a point a game and going okay. But do you feel like that was a big missed opportunity, or maybe Ipswich not as bad as the teams from last year?
Ipswich definitely not a bad team. Good opposition, gave us a good game, and it was, I think it was a difficult game for us early in the season, where one might be hoping for something a bit easier on a newly promoted side. Yeah, my sort of lasting feeling, I suppose, is still that it's a bit of an opportunity missed. Um, Frustrating that the international break comes so early. I think if there was ever a opportunity to sort of gather a bit of momentum, that's kind of been snuffed out. Sadly, all of our new recruits who are very, very fresh and new to this squad. Pretty much all of them are away, so they didn't spend a lot of time at Motspur Park. So we don't even have the benefit there of additional um, training opportunities and preparation opportunities. So it's for me, the international break comes at a bit of a frustrating time. It's a bit mad for me, really, that we play 3 games and then break for two. I don't.
Mm,
I know it's a busy schedule, and obviously these games have to be scheduled in, but it seems like I don't know. It, you know, it just seems way too early. Really, we just got going, and maybe if we'd just been clobbered, 5-0 by Man City, and then another um, silly result, you'd want to go and lick your wounds and regroup. But I think what we're trying to do now is just bed these players in, and obviously training ground time is important, but we probably want to get them out on the park and give them more and more and more minutes with
mm.
the rest of the players. So it's a bit of a uncomfortable restart for me. But anyway, here we are.
Yeah,
So
I think it's an interesting one. The international break, Marco loves an international break, and we often do bounce back better from them. And I think not just the result was poor against Ipswich, but the actual performance itself. There's a lot to work on, and so in a way, it felt like the international break actually came at quite a good time in a sense because it does give Marco the opportunity to actually sort himself out. So like you said, it's a shame that players like Sander Berge and Joachim Anderson were unable to train with the squad over that period because I think it would have made a big difference if they'd been around. But I'm hoping that the fact that Anthony Robinson was rested, didn't get selected, and actually managed to stay around helps. Um, Reese Nelson, Smith Rowe weren't on international duty, so they got a bit of time to spend together on the training pitch and
sure.
more so than with the other players with Marco and starting to understand Marco's style a little bit better. I think that's almost as important as being out there with the other players around you. Getting some kind of quiet time with Marco Silva would actually be quite beneficial. Um, Looking at the game coming up this weekend, and Dave, I'll throw to you first. Game up against West Ham, who have been, okay so far this season. They've got a few injury issues at the moment at the back, and potentially Areola out for this game as well. But how are you seeing this game lining up against West Ham?
I think West Ham, a little bit like us, haven't quite settled into their kind of rhythm this season. They've done a lot of business. I think widely acknowledged to be quite good business during the summer, but they haven't kind of got them all in place and firing yet. So I'd say there's a kind of similarity there between the two sides, both trying to find our feet and what our best 11 is. So it's an interesting game. Of course, it's a game that we won 5-0 last year. In fact, uh, we won in total 7-0 last year if you include the away game. And I like to remind the West Ham fans about that. But this game, I'm hoping we can, show a little bit more the team that we know that we can be. Hopefully there'll be some changes. I'm not expecting there to be any, but I'd like there to be some changes. And I'd just like to see, a little bit more like the Leicester game, but with a bit more cutting edge. And I think we can get a result. But West Ham is certainly no mugs, and as I say, they've done good business. It's a good test.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dad, your thoughts on West Ham? Obviously, it's early doors, and they came up against Man City recently, so it's always hard to really judge a team by games like that. But how do you feel West Ham have got off to in terms of their start to the season?
Well, that would require me to look at their form, which I did look at the slides of their form just before we started. But the biggest highlight that I saw there was a fairly comprehensive beating the Man City, which they're in good company, and then a bit patchy from my memory. Um, but it as Dave said, I do not expect them to be an easy beat at all. And the problem is the bigger problem is we're not firing yet. That's a bigger problem. Is we can talk as much as we like about the opposition we're going to come up against, but they're all Premier League teams, and Ipswich shows what happens if you're not organised.
Yeah.
My wish list coming out the back of Ipswich would have been time for Anderson to learn the system, time for Sanderberger or time for us to understand what the best pairing with Sanderberger might be, on the assumption that we paid good money for him and he's got to come in at some point. So is it Lukic? Is it can we get Pereira to really work, in the 8 alongside him? And the one thing that we would have had an opportunity to do would be for us to work out how Mooney's and Emil Smith Rowe combine better and more effectively, and additionally how our midfield actually feeds Mooney's in a more constructive way. So I'm hoping that at least one of those three things have been achieved, or we've made some progress on the how do we better feed Moonies, or how do we better combine with Moonies, because we've been patient. We are believers. We love Moonies. We love him for the story and the kind of guy he is, and we want him to be successful. But he needs to start firing. I don't want to create heat on him, but it needs to happen, and that's a really important part. That I know we're going to be expecting goals from all over the park, and that's pretty much how this Fulham side is always expected to perform. But we do need Mooney's to start scoring some goals, and we need to help him do that. He can't do it on his own.
Yeah, and look, fortunately for us, in a sense, West Ham are a team who we do actually have a fairly good record against. Like you said, Dave, last season 7-0 across the 2 games. We do score goals against West Ham, and it's almost like Marco's figured out their system and worked out the way to actually beat them. And so that does play into our favour. And I do hope that in having someone like Muniz there, and who is slightly struggling, I feel like this is an opportunity for him to actually get his first goal of the season. And I feel like we're saying it every week, but it really does feel like he's getting closer. And it's not like he's playing poorly. I think he's actually doing a lot of the build-up play really well, a lot of the classic centre forward hold-up play really well. It's just not clicking in front of goal. And we sort of saw that with, he had a fairly open header that he probably should have buried about 6 yards out, and I think he put it straight at the keeper from memory, where that's got to go to one of the corners and be finished. And it feels like once he gets that first, it'll be like last season. It'll just go on a roll after that, and he'll start to score more. But I do fully agree. I think it's less about how well West Ham play, and it's more about how well Fulham actually play here. So I don't think we're going to see the best side in the league coming at us in West Ham. They do have a few injury issues at the back, where there are a couple of players that they've signed recently. Wan-Bissaka's not quite fully fit yet and hasn't really played enough games. The new signings they've made are good signings, but not fully embedded yet. Areola picked up a bit of a knock in the last game and was subbed at half time, I think, against Man City, and is a possible doubt for this game, which Fabianski's a good backup goalkeeper for them. But any kind of changes, I think, to your starting lineup is going to send a few ripples through. So it's going to be a West Ham side who are, going to have to fight quite hard for this victory. But it's more about how well Fulham actually play. And if we put in a performance like we did against Ipswich, I think we're going to really struggle. If we put in a performance like we did for large parts of the Man United and the Leicester game, I think we should be able to walk away from this one with a good result. Dave, you mentioned before you weren't really sure if Marco's going to make any changes. A couple of things, I guess, to mention. Firstly, Anderson played a full 90 minutes during the international break and looked very good as well from all accounts. And obviously Diop played okay in the last 3 games, but we all know that his time is going to be up soon, you would have thought. Additionally, you look at someone like Harry Wilson, who had a really good couple of games for Wales. He got an assist and an absolute screamer goal as well. Do you think there's the potential for Marco to make some changes, considering he's played the same 11 3 games in a row, which he doesn't do that often, let's be honest. Do you think we might see a change this week, or do you see Marco really sticking with that 11 that's proved to be doing okay so far?
Well, this is the question that's been running through my head through this international break. As I mentioned at the start, I've gone back and forth on it. I think that this is part of the problem with doing kind of business late into August, is that it appears that Marco has kind of had a bit of a cut-off point, which was during the friendlies, and where he put out kind of what we now see as the strongest side he thinks is available. And we've seen that side from Hoffenheim all the way through the first 3 games. That's a team he's worked with through kind of August, and I don't think he's ready to give up on that yet. And I think that the other guys might have to wait a little longer. As much as I would like to see some changes, because you're right, I think Diop is a little bit on borrowed time, even though he's not done anything particularly wrong. I just think that Anderson will offer us a lot more in, possession of the ball and his contribution from the back. That's something everyone's quite aware of. But I just think that Marco won't change too much too soon. I think if we'd have perhaps brought Anderson in mid-July, then he'd firmly be in the team by now. But this is the challenge. Moving further forward in the pitch, I think, again, I'd like to see, Berger get a chance to come into the side. I don't know whether that would be at the expense of Pereira, or whether there'd be some movement further forward, perhaps moving Pereira into the 10, moving Iwobi to the bench, and Smith Rowe to the left. That's another option. Yeah. But I just don't think those changes will come this Saturday, unfortunately. And that makes me a little bit nervous because we haven't quite clicked yet. And I'm just desperate to see these guys. So I've got my gut feel is it will be the same team. I'm quite interested as well to see the bench, because, we've brought in Reece Nelson now. Someone's got to drop out, right? So, who's that going to be too? That's another interesting question. It's quite senior pros on the bench. Will we lose Cuenca? Will he have to drop out? Would it be Harrison Reed? Would it be Tom Kearney? I'm not sure. So it's good that we've got those, quite a big squad now, but there's still, even if the first 11's unchanged, I think there's still some. It'll be interesting to see how the bench lines up too, and what options we'll have to change things.
Yeah, well, like you said, I look at the bench from last game, which I assume would be quite similar. Sanderberger, Anderson were both on the bench, Cuenca as well. You're probably looking at Harrison Reed, Harry Wilson, Tom Kearney, and Raul Jimenez as the 4 who'd be at risk of dropping out. You also include there that someone like Josh King, I think, probably deserves an opportunity to be sitting on the bench. I don't know if you guys were following, but he actually captained England to a tournament victory during the international break and scored what proved to be one of the winning goals as well in the final game. So he's flying high at the moment, and I'd actually be saying, make a few changes there and potentially have some changes in the starting lineup, but also have players dropping out. When you look at someone like Reece Nelson able to come onto the bench, does Jimenez really need to be on our bench at this stage? If he's not really making any impact when he's coming off the bench, does Vinny potentially get an opportunity? Does Reece Nelson take that sort of striker's spot, and maybe someone like Adama goes up front, or Iwobi goes up front, or Smith Rowe plays up front and plays out the full game, as more of a poacher towards the end of the game? There's definitely some options there, but as we've all sort of touched on, Marco doesn't like to take too many risks and doesn't like to make too many changes. So I reckon there'll be some changes on the bench. I'm not 100% sure if we're going to see changes in the starting lineup quite yet. I reckon this could be the final time, though, we do see Diop in defence. Maybe Bassi if he doesn't have a very good game as well. Because I think after another week on the training field and getting those players gelling, it makes sense to have Anderson come in. But further forward, there's definitely a harder conversation to be had about who drops out, because Pereira is one of Marco Silva's absolute favourites. I can't see him being easily dropped out of the starting 11. So how does Sander Berger come in? Because he surely has to come in. Dad, your thoughts
Well,
on how
yeah,
you line all that up?
I have a lot of thoughts. I think Dave actually summed up the situation we find ourselves in very, very well. And I'm just not going to dump on Marco for having a solid process. He's not a guy for chaos, and he's got a very, very um, tried and tested process that I think everyone understands, and I'm all for it. The the thing that is obviously frustrating is that we know why we're in this situation is because we didn't complete enough key signings, like key spine signings early enough. And so if you marry that with the way in which Silver goes about his team selection, you're always going to end up in this place where you're staring at either the cottage or the bench, and there are good players that you're kind of screaming inside and hoping and wishing they were playing. Because Marco's, I'm sad to say, he's more likely to stick with a slightly weaker, mediocre side of star quality than go for chaos and just pick
Yeah.
um, very, very good players that ought to be there. I mean, personally, you asked me what would I do. I'd always pick my best 11, and I think this works because Silver's got a lot of flexibility in his squad. He's got a lot of utility in his squad, and so you made a comment about, oh, does Vinny get a go? Um, if Mooney's got injured, would you feel uncomfortable about two or three different players ahead of Vinny, going up top? I mean, ESR, I know that's not where he plays, but you'd fancy his chances of being effective. You know, you could mention a number of people up front, and not to dump on Vinny, which I know has become a sort of a national sport. Um, he just isn't of the same quality, so I wouldn't be breaking my neck just to name him on the bench because his squad title is striker. I feel a bit the same about Jimenez. Um, Obviously, he's got history, if not form, and he can do it or has done it, and he's shown us flashes that he's certainly capable of mixing it at Premier League. But you know, for so many reasons, I he's not the guy at the moment. He's on paper, he's our second best striker. Can I say that? I think
Yeah.
he probably is. But I would I would honestly believe that there are other better options than giving Jimenez 15 minutes at the end if Muniz isn't scoring. And I don't know that Silva. You asked me what would I do. I don't know that Silva would ever do that. He's not that kind of guy. But I'd like to see it. I mean, you've got a lot of options. We've got, with Reece Nelson, we've got ESR. Frustrated as we might be with Pereira, he can play in a forward position, and yeah, we've got other options, and I'd be using them. But how long can we really sit Anderson, to a lesser degree Berger? How long can we sit Anderson on the bench? He's just got to start sooner or later, surely. That you have to roll the dice on that, even though he may not have played a lot with the team. He certainly would have trained, a few weeks now. Um, it's not important that he knows his way around Motspur Park or even the cottage change rooms. He's just a he's just a good footballer. He's a professional centre back. He's quality, and he could step in and have a bad day and still do better than Diop. And I hate to say that because he's been a good servant so far, but it just is that way.
Yeah. No, look, I agree. I think some changes need to come. It's just a matter of when from now. It's going to happen. Let's be honest. You don't spend all that money to build out your squad unless you are one of those top six teams. So those players have been signed to play first team football for Fulham at some point. It's just a matter of when. And I have faith in Marco. For me, he does it a little bit slowly. I'd prefer to do it a bit quicker and just say, these guys are quality. Throw them in the deep end. They'll work it out. They're good enough players. That's why we spend all this money on them. I understand wanting to bed them in properly first, though, and making sure that they are fully ready and fully integrated into the squad, even though it does take time. Quick look at recent form. Obviously, we know Fulham doing well at the moment. Couple of wins and a draw over our last three games. A loss against Man United, and still friendlies in this recent form. Looking forward to those being out of there so we can actually pay attention to them properly. But we'll look at West Ham's recent form. The draw against Celta Vigo in pre-season doesn't mean a huge amount. Losses to Aston Villa and Man City so far in the league this season. 2-0 win away from home against Crystal Palace and a 1-0 win in the Cup against Bournemouth. Doesn't tell a full story, I'd say. Villa and Man City, we know, are decent sides. Crystal Palace are, struggling to sign players because Fulham keep signing them. Cup games never really mean anything, let's be perfectly honest. So it's going to be tough to know what kind of West Ham we're going to come up against. I'm sort of hoping that we do well against them, but it's going to be a hard game, I think, for Fulham. It's at least we're at the Cottage, I think, first time to play West Ham, and we did demolish them at the Cottage last time round. I'm hoping that's sticking in the back of the minds of both sets of players, because the Cottage is not an easy place to come to, and I'm hopeful that Marco actually pulls his finger out over this international break and gets into the team and hopefully changes the way we play. Quick look at the table as well. You can see Fulham sitting in 12th, pretty much level with West Ham, who are in 13th place, 1 point ahead of them. Still very tight at the moment. A win here takes us up potentially into European spots. Early days, obviously, but Southampton and Everton sitting at the bottom with no points. Leicester, Palace, Ipswich and Wolves all with just the 1 point so far from their games. So, look, there's a long way to go. It's still early days in the season, but Fulham, I'd say, like you said at the start, Dave, sitting pretty much on par for where we expect them to be at this stage. Guys, let's move on to something I wanted to touch on. Actually, before we do, let's get some predictions for the game. Dave, I'll throw to you first. You're on mute. Sorry, mate.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think you mentioned West Ham have got some difficulties at the back. I think there'll be goals in the game for both sides. I think it might be. Of course, I'd love us to get the points, but I have a feeling it might be a score draw. I'll go with 2-2.
2-2. Love it. And also, Dave, just for the live stream, they do want to know which Weatherspoons and what your table number is.
Yeah, I'm still covering that, and I'm covering the name because, I definitely don't want these people coming up and serving me during the podcast. That'd be quite distracting. And
we definitely want that to happen. But, fair enough. Dad, prediction for the game?
Well, I had 2-2 as well in my head, but why not? I don't have to be different. I can go 2-2. I think there will be goals. 2-2.
Yeah, I'm going to go 3-2 for this one. I agree there's going to be goals. I think 3-2 to Fulham. I feel like the defences for both teams are not fully settled yet. Muniz is going to start scoring at some point. I think it's this game. And I think it's going to be very open across the whole game, and it's going to be very attacking. So my fingers are firmly crossed for a 3-2 win for Fulham. I haven't done a top tip this week. I might have to put that out during the week when the odds get fully released so I can delve a bit deeper. But guys, let's move to another topic which is worth talking about and discussing. And it has been reported quite widely over the last week or so, mainly by Martin Calladine, who is the author of Ugly Game and is at Ugly Game on Twitter. Fulham's partnership with IUX as official CFD trading partner. It's the official CFD trading partner of Fulham seems to be a poison chalice at the moment. It's handed from Titan Capital now onto IUX, and both companies seem to have the same issues. Dave and Dad as well. I know you guys have listened to the work that Fulham Focus did. Have read a lot of what Martin Calladine has said as well. I guess, Dave, I'll throw to you first. Just your overall thoughts on how on earth this has happened again.
Yeah, it's really frustrating that we seem to have aligned ourselves with another kind of grubby company that kind of is using Fulham as a kind of white collar brand to attach themselves to and legitimize themselves when really they're faced at, trying to basically get people to invest that are from kind of third world poor countries and with guarantees of ridiculous returns, which, would never be regulated in the UK. So why the club think that's an ethical partner to attach themselves to is beyond me. I think, as you said, I'd listened to the Fulham Focus pod, who did a good job covering it, and I think that it does feel that they've probably been introduced via an agent, as Titan Capital were this time last year. But you'd think after what happened last year, where they had to cancel that partnership, that this time they'd do some checks themselves, and not just cash the check, because these companies aren't regulated in the UK or the EU or the US, and there's a reason for that. So, yeah, look, my overriding thing is real just disappointment that they haven't done their due diligence again on this issue. It doesn't surprise me, because I know that the club and certain people within the hierarchy are very kind of commercially, financially minded. But it's they've got to show some kind of ethical considerations as well in these deals that they're making, because it just looks so bad on the club as a whole and the brand. So yeah, to be honest, it just brings me to this whole point about this football regulator now that we've got, the government have put in place, and I think this is the kind of stuff they need to focus on, not just at Fulham but just at clubs generally. It's taken too long for the kind of grubby gambling sponsors to be kind of banned from the front of shirts, and this latest thing about clubs aligning themselves with these overseas financial companies, it's just another kind of horrible part of football at the moment that I'd just like to see the back of.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
fully agree, Dad.
Yeah. Well said, mate. There's not a lot to add to describe the story and the state we're in. And we're not naive to the reality that these sort of companies exist. There's plenty of profits to be made from um, poorly informed and desperate people in first worlds, but also even worse in third worlds. But this stuff exists. But how on earth do we keep getting into bed with it? How this has been widely talked about in the Fulham community over the last days, if not almost a week now. I think, if I'm correct in saying, it has actually made one newspaper in the UK, and it would be something if the club actually made a statement about it. God forbid, actually announced that they were going to be tearing up the partnership. Just come out and owned it and apologized, and someone needs to apologize for it, because they promised that processes would be put in place after the Titan partnership, and either they have been, and someone judged that this is a perfectly good and reasonable partnership for us to get involved in, or there have been no changes to due diligence processes at all. And I think, whilst football clubs, and certainly this one, are a private company and they're under no obligation to tell us about their every move, um, football clubs are different, and English football clubs are very, very different. And there's a very special relationship between clubs and their fan base. And I, I just don't think you can have a long innings if you behave like this.
Mm.
of course, you can continue to ignore it and shove your chin out and hope that um, you know tomorrow's news buries this, or maybe a couple of good wins, and we don't think about it anymore. Um, but I think fans are very uncomfortable with the front that this appears to have in terms of how the hierarchy are managing this over time. It's not good. It's grubby. It's really grubby.
Yeah. And I think, sort of echoing what you said as well, the issue here is it's quite clearly grubby. As we've said, the work's been done to work out that there's a lot of issues here, and the problem for me is that Fulham have just not come out and said, yeah, look, we're looking into it. We understand that there's been some talk about IUX. We are going to do some more research because maybe we missed something first time round. Simple as that, just to say, yes, maybe there's an issue here that we maybe missed. And look, they should never have missed it in the first place. Let's be perfectly honest. But it's possible that this one slipped through the cracks somehow. Like you said, Dave, probably through a third party. But to be completely silent on something that is clearly an issue and is something that fans are, you could say, up in arms about. There's a lot of people making a lot of comments about it, and it's widely reported online so far. I know it's not picked up by mainstream media so far, but I'd say Twitter is just as powerful a service as mainstream media is at the moment. The fact that Fulham have just remained completely silent, the supporters trusts have said that they would, well, they've made a statement. It hasn't really hit home or done anything. Fan advisory board haven't really said anything so far either. Like, where do we go from here? And when do Fulham actually step forward and say, yes, we're going to sort this out and hopefully tear up the contract? Because at the moment, it looks terrible from an outsider's perspective. There's so many issues with it, and it's taken no time at all to uncover all of this. That's the problem. Like, I know that this is small fry in terms of a sponsorship deal. It might not be worth a huge amount of money, but well, to Fulham that is, but to IUX they're getting to a global audience, so it's huge for them. And why haven't we
Well,
done
that
proper due
that
diligence on it?
that's the point. Steve Reynolds has made a couple of comments on the live chat, which are fair comments, and said that IUX state on the website that they don't accept clients from the UK and the EU, and they yeah, but the game is clear. You're literally putting a moniker on a F1 driver's helmet and getting a couple of hours of prime time worldwide and global branding,
Mm,
and so there's credibility that comes with that, and people draw certain conclusions as to how legitimate companies are, and that's the ruse, that it appears to be legitimate because it's on a Premier League shirt being broadcast around the world, and
yeah.
people will make certain assumptions about the legitimacy when there clearly is very little legitimacy and it's not regulated, and probably a big dirty bucket for money never to be seen again. So
Mm,
it's just not okay. Um, well, quite apart from the obvious, I just don't understand a how we do these deals. B, why we don't actually walk back from them very very quickly and come out and just accept the chin, and maybe someone's going to fall on their sword on this for this publicly, because it's perhaps not the same person, but it's hard to believe that a sponsorship deal. I mean, what are we thinking here? Is it a five figure? Is it a six figure type of deal? It it's hard to believe that a sponsorship doesn't go all the way to the top, and there'd be, even if the dollars weren't big. Um, I would say that everyone in senior management, or key people in senior management, get involved in deciding whether this goes or doesn't go. There's no way. There's no way in my head that someone gets on a shirt or on a partner page no matter how big the financial value or the quantum of the deal is. Um, you know, football clubs, and Fulham are no different, are obsessed with managing their PR and their brand. And so, how could it possibly be that any old company gets to partner with Fulham? Doesn't make sense. Doesn't add up.
Mm. Dave, where would you see? Where would you like to see this, or how would you like to see this resolved? What would you like to see from Fulham as the next steps from here?
Well, yeah, I think, you know, just to align themselves with, you know, if they have to do commercial deals with these kind of companies, financial companies, then just ones that are based and approved for the UK consumer would be nice as a start. But ideally, I'd rather the league and maybe this governing body start to put in some legislation that blocks clubs' abilities to deal kind of these grubby businesses, which a lot of them as well are often linked to organized crime in different countries. I'm not saying IUXs, but a lot of these kind of financial based companies have links to a lot of organized crime across the world. So you've got to be really, really careful. And I just, for me, I just don't really like talking about this issue. I think it's just horrible. I'd much rather be talking about football, but this is the world we live in. So I think I'd like to see more regulation, because the Premier League clubs themselves can't really be trusted ethically to make the right decisions. They're led by financial gain. So if that's the case, then there needs to be some sort of regulation that protects the brand of football. And that's what I would like to see as a result of it long term.
Yeah. Dad, I guess knowing what we know so far about IUX, do you see any path back for this? Do you think this is just at the point now where Fulham just have to tear this one up and start again?
I'd like to think so. I would. I'd have some respect for the management if they actually admitted a failure in process or a misunderstanding in decision making, or something that is just off. Um, yeah, I'd like to see a statement from the club that notifies us that they're actually reviewed it. They've reviewed the partnership. They're tearing it up. They're and this time they're actually going to. Do I really want them to say they're going to put in place better due diligence processes? They've already promised that. Yeah, I think
I
Dave's
think that
probably on the
means a
money.
huge amount.
As much as I hate over legislation and meddling, there comes a point where if people can't organise themselves and can't be trusted to do the right thing, then what choice do you have but for a third party to come in and say, well, if you can't actually behave properly, well, these are the guidelines and the rules. In fact, not just guidelines, but these are the rules. You can't do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I do hope that I'm not going to ask for heads to roll, but I do hope that Fulham at least take some action here and say, look, we made another mistake. We're tearing this one up. Maybe we just won't have an official CFD trading partner for a few years and do a couple of years worth of research before we get into bed with another company that we don't really know anything about. Um, I want to see it torn up. Let's be perfectly honest. I think they need to start again. And look, if you want more information on this, I do fully recommend checking out Martin Calladine on Twitter at Ugly Game. You can also check out our article about it on cravenpod.com just to learn a little bit more about the background of it all and to see some of the quotes from Martin there as well. Guys, before we wrap up, I do just want to touch on Fulham Women's, who are absolutely flying at the moment, top of the league, unbeaten after 3 games. They had a 9-1 win against Ashford on the weekend. Sophie Manzi just scored a casual 5 before halftime, 2 for Taylor Makepeace, 1 for Tagliavini, 1 for Heisman late on. Another dominant win from this team, who are going from strength to strength this year, really making a statement early doors that they're pushing for that single promotion spot to get into the 4th tier. Dad, 23 goals scored, 1 conceded in the first 3 games. Good signs so far.
Yeah, incredible. Um, I, I I was going to say I don't know what they have to do, but I do know what they have to do, and that is to actually end at the top of the table in order
Yeah.
to proceed. And it's a really such a tough ask. But you've got to be faultless, and you cannot miss a beat. And it's looking good so far. Let's hope that the signings and changes they've made has just added that little bit of quality to ensure that they've got the depth, so they don't falter. But it's such a tough ask, and I believe from reading some of the chat in the Discord that the next league up, should they be promoted, has the same narrow gate further north, um, which is just so hard. I mean, um, it almost means that if you're serious about it, you've just got to buy in a really strong squad and make utterly sure of it. Otherwise, you could be having an otherwise near blemish free season and just not progressing, which would be disappointing.
Yeah, look, it's tough. It's tough going in those women's leagues because of the nature of it, where only one team gets promoted out of tier five, only one team gets promoted out of tier four, and again, only one team gets promoted out of tier three as well. Um, I guess that's sort of what it's like, and we saw it all with Welcome to Wrexham as well, when you see how hard it is to get out of the National League because there's only that sort of one automatic spot to get up. It's even worse for Fulham Women's, there's no playoffs. You have to finish top of the league, and really you can't slip up. Uh, Dave, I guess so far the Fulham women haven't been challenged so much. And the upcoming games, Sporting London, Benfica, who they play against, and then Haywards Heath, who they play against the week after. Um, those games are against newly promoted teams who Fulham are likely to beat quite easily. But after that, Fulham play Dartford, who are looking like the other strongest team in the league. How, how important do you think it is to not get too carried away at this stage? You know, scoring 6 in the first game, 7 in the second, 9 in the third, potentially going to be high scoring games, and then coming up against a team who are likely to give us the biggest challenge of the season, still quite early in the season. How important is it to sort of keep your feet on the ground and not get too carried away early doors?
Well, of course, you don't want complacency to set in, but momentum's really important in football. And I
Mm,
think if you start, more results you get like this, the more teams start to fear you and start to almost look at the calendar and write that fixture off as a loss before you've even played the game. So I think it's, to start like they have, I think that's going to put a lot of fear in a lot of the teams that they play now. Um, and they're all going to know that they're going to be in for a really good game. So I think it's good. The momentum's there. Keep it going. It's such a difficult league to get out of. But, given that Fulham were the first, professional club in England back when Mohammed Al Fayed's days, I think it'd be nice for the club to get further back up the table, and it just might take longer because it's so narrow. The pyramid's so narrow. So, yeah, great start. Keep it going, and hopefully that top of the league spot can be Fulham's this year.
yeah,
I,
well,
I
it's
do
looking really good so far. Yeah, go on, Dad.
I do think there comes a point, and maybe we're at that point. If you look at the clubs around us in that league, in the laser waffle, um, setup wise, there's no comparison. We're a Premier League club, and we're playing in a very low division for our women's team, and there's probably, well, arguably more infrastructure around this, just given the nature of the whole club setup. More infrastructure, almost lopsided amount of infrastructure around a team playing at that level. And there comes a point, surely, when the club's got to, you know, shit or get off the pot and decide whether they're really going to go for this and just blast their way through it, which will be, not to cast um, good servants aside, but the same issue or challenge that we have with the men's team. If the vision and objective is improvement, then the squad has to evolve. And I think if the club's objective is truly to be playing women's football up and around where other Premier League clubs are playing their women's football, we got to get a move on. This is not. It's a professional club. We surely have a mission of getting that team to the very top level as fast as possible, and it takes money, it takes resources. And I think we've got to get on with it. Stop sort of playing around and pretending like we're an amateur club just enjoying a bit of women's football. We have ambition, surely.
Yeah, and look, I think the one good thing is this team is obviously playing in tier 5, but the squad that we've put together is probably more of a tier 4 squad at this stage. Like we said, it's very, very hard to get out of this division in the first place, and the fact that we missed out last year was probably down to just the fact that that Dulwich Hamlet side who did go up were incredibly strong and have shown it in tier 4 already. They're sitting, comfortably in the upper mid table. I think this Fulham side at this stage with the new signings this season, Evie Gain, Lily Stevens, um, it's big changes that have taken us to that next level, and it's showing in the score lines of every game so far. Um, and I think we're at a point where if we do get promoted this season, and fingers crossed that does happen, we should only have to add maybe 3 or 4 key players to really challenge for back-to-back promotions. And I think if all of a sudden Fulham get themselves into tier 3, where you're one step, well, you're 2 steps below the Women's Premier League, but the fact is they've put the Women's Championship in place now, which the structure is there for Fulham to progress and actually get to being a WPL team in the hopefully near future. There's definitely the potential, if we do put the money into it, to be pushing ourselves up towards that top end. Because, like you say, you look at the teams that Fulham are having to play. Millwall Lionesses, who've had some issues with their link with the men's club, I believe. The rest of the teams that Fulham play are effectively non-league clubs. Looking at Dorking Wanderers, Ashford United, nothing against these clubs, but we should be playing against other Premier League teams, maybe Championship teams. And as you move into Tier 4, you see QPR in the league above us. AFC Wimbledon, I think, won that league the year before. We should be a Tier 3 team, and we should be working towards that and getting to that stage as soon as possible. I think sitting in Tier 5 for a team like Fulham is just not really acceptable. If we want to take our football seriously as a club and be seen as a progressive club, you need your academy team to be at the very top, which it is. You need your first team to be at the very top, which it is. And to round that out now, we want our women's team to be at the very top, and they're not there yet. And I think more funds needs to go into it because the basis, the structure for the team is there. We just need to actually fund it and push it as hard as we can to get them up to where that team belongs. Like Dave said, we were the first ever professional women's team. We should get back to that point and be proud of that as part of our history, and we should be trying to replicate that sooner rather than later.
Well, quickly. And
Yeah.
the Wrexham example. A lot of people poo-poo Wrexham and Hollywood, and clever marketing and multimedia, so on and so forth. But if the path north is very narrow, they literally geared up for a squad capable of competing, arguably 2 leagues higher,
Yeah.
and that's probably what you've got to do. And I know the team we've got, the squad we have now, could probably compete very well in the league higher, but it's so difficult to progress. So why would you risk it
Yeah.
of just languishing for too long? Particularly given the relative investment we're talking about here. I know the spoils aren't as big, but neither would the cost be for
Yeah.
someone like Fulham to carry.
In
And
the
so
scheme of
just to
things, for sure.
that's to bring the equilibrium up. It's kind of it's a matter of respect for the brand, to be honest, and the club, that these girls should be, pushed forward as fast as possible. We're right on
Yeah.
brand today, aren't we, Dave?
Yeah, we are. We are. I was just laughing at a comment by Steve in the he just made in the comments around if any, because I'm sitting alone at a pub. If anyone sees me at West Ham, to give me a hug. So I appreciate that, Steve. I'll look forward to that.
Well, guys, I think we can probably wrap it up there so you can get back to drinking your Coke, Dave. We'll tell everyone on the everyone who can see it on the live stream can see it's a Coke. We'll pretend that it's something more, a little bit stronger. But Dave, thanks very much for joining today.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me. As I said, it's hate the international break. Really looking forward to Saturday, getting back down the cottage. Hopeful of a performance. Love to see some changes. Not sure we'll get them, but I'd love to see a performance. A win would be huge. I think it would turn a good, like an okay starter to the season into a really good start to the season with a win on Saturday. So yeah, let's just hope and pray for the result.
And now we're finishing our stream. Are you willing to share which Weatherspoons and table number you're at?
Still no, because I'm actually don't know the name of it. I didn't even check it when I came in the door.
And you might need to use it again, Dave. So I'd keep it under wraps.
Good call. I will.
Smart. Thanks very much, Dave. Dad, thanks for joining tonight.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm so looking forward to the weekend. It's been quiet, and we'd have to focus on difficult issues like this IUX stuff. But I'm really looking forward to it. I hope I'm wrong, actually, and I hope we do get a win. I want Moonies to score. I want some of those new signings to actually start, and I want to have a little bit more optimism around this team rather than us kind of feeling like we're not quite there yet, and we're somewhere back in the middle of the summer period, still using Premier League games as training exercises. So yeah, just a quick note. I'm going to say hi, Sam, because he asked to be mentioned, and I'll just see if he actually listens to the end. So we'll just test that one. Say nothing.
100% not listen to the end. I fully agree. Look, I'm hopeful that the team come back refreshed and recharged after the international break. Let's be honest, I think it actually came at a pretty good time for us. So I hope we do bounce back with a win against West Ham. I'm looking forward to seeing Josh King come off the bench and score his first goal in his first Premier League game to win us the game at the Cottage, and just further increase the aura around the young kid who is doing some amazing things at the moment. Big thank you to everyone who joined us on the live stream. Thank you to everyone who continues to support the podcast. We really do appreciate it. Please continue to share it with everyone you know. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you rate us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, everywhere you find the podcasts. Check out the YouTube, check out the website, check out the Discord. And as always, come on, you whites.